But now I'm feeling that I'm moving on. But every time quiet when I'm coming home. And loneliness keeping me my ghost. I'm trying to make a sense and find the reasons to hold, reasons to fight for love. We give it.
Hey, what's up everybody? Joshua Casper back at you with Plugin Boutique. And I've got another Neoverb video for you. Today I'm going to show you 5 other really cool things about this reverb from iZotope. I've already shown you dedicated videos for the Reverb Assistant and the masking features, which are both in their own right very, very cool. But there are 5 other things that I really want to draw your attention to. And this is by no means everything that Neoverb has to offer. They're just the 5 that really stood out to me on top of the Reverb Assistant and the masking feature. The first one is the algorithm mixer, and that is this 3-point system right inside of the middle of the plugin. What this does is allows you to mix between 3 different reverb algorithms to find the perfect balance of the 3 for whatever you're working with. So I've got Neoverb on a vocal right here, and what I'm going to do is just play the vocal and move this little dial around this canvas just to show you the range of reverbs that you have after running the Reverb Assistant.
But now I'm feeling that I'm moving on. But every time quiet when I'm coming home. And loneliness keeping me my ghost. I'm trying to make a sense and find the reasons to hold, reasons to fight for love. We give advance above, but what is reasons to fight for love?
So just having those 3 algorithms present and being able to mix between them, or all 3 of them in fact, very easily to hear the differences, it's just incredible. Neoverb isn't the first reverb to do this, but I'm so happy that they did it. I think this is something that's going to be happening more and more in future reverbs just because of how powerful it is. Now, it doesn't stop there. You can come in and reflections will always be reflections. You can bypass any one of them, and then you essentially have a bipolar thing over here. You also have plate or medium chamber algorithms, and then hall or large chamber algorithms. So it's going to start really short, get a little bit bigger, and then the really big stuff down here. You also have control over the space right here. And this brings me to point number 2. These space controls are actually macros. So I can easily, let's bring it all the way over here and see what it sounds like. And then I'm going to pull back on the space.
But now I'm feeling that I'm moving on. But every time quiet when I'm coming home. And loneliness keeping me my ghost. I'm trying to make a sense.
It's really changing the length of the tail and the size of the room, and that's the point. These are actually macro controls, and if I flip open the advanced settings and move this up and down, you'll actually see that it's moving the time and the size. And I can come in here and boost up the size and pull down on the time and then move this. Those will be relative to one another again. Really, really cool. Anything that allows me to get big results very quickly and boost my workflow is always a big plus in my book. And I just wanted to point that out. Between having the control over the space, you know, you've got the 3 different algorithms, and then you can mix between the 3, and then you have really drastic controls over the size and space that you're working with each one of the algorithms, and you have a ton of control right out of the gate right there. So that was number 2. The third one is this smooth over here. And what I have is Neoverb on some drums. Let's listen. What the smooth is it can be bypassed or activated, and it's an actual transient shaper for the incoming audio signal. So when you're working with something like drums, for example, you can get some really harsh tones coming out of your reverb, especially in the cheaper reverbs, when you have a really harsh, quick transient. But what the smooth feature does inside of Neoverb is it subdues that. It actually pulls back on those transients to allow a lusher reverb. So what I'm going to do is just really crank up the dry wet here. And, you know, you'd never want to do this. You know, I've got the pre-EQ bypass. We could probably bypass the reverb EQ as well. And what I'm going to do is just introduce the smooth amount and see if you can't spot the harshness of the transients being pushed back on as I increase this smooth amount. So it's a huge difference there. We'll do it one more time. And this time I'm just going to go ahead and bypass the smooth by turning it on and turning it off so you can really hear the difference. So it is a fairly subtle effect, but it's definitely noticeable, especially when you're pushing it to a ridiculous wet mix right here. I mean, I'd really, on these drums, would pull way back on this. I'd also make sure my reverb EQ was cutting off the low end so we're not muddying up the mix, maybe tweak out the pre-EQ, but having that on, especially on a really plucky pluck or a really plucked guitar, for example, or especially drums, using that smooth control over there is really going to help give you lush, better sounding reverb. Okay, so that was feature number 3 that I wanted to point out. And next we're going to talk about synced reverb. So this is something that is so cool in my opinion. I'm going to pull down the pre-delay to 0. So this is what the delay sounds like normally. It's a great sounding reverb, probably too much for drums, but what I want to show you is on the time parameter inside the advanced settings when you flip it open, each one of the times here, you can turn sync on. So instead of milliseconds, you can have actual beats, and this is going to be synced to whatever your project BPM is inside of your DAW. You can also do that to the pre-delay and get some really cool delay effects, but I'm going to leave that alone for right now, and let's bypass these two. Come in here and make sure we're getting just the hall. So right there with it on an eighth, the reverb tail is only going to last an eighth. And that is just mind-blowing. You know, reverb is a great tool on percussion, but you're going to want to be careful with it. And having the sync feature inside of here is going to produce some really cool results and make things a lot easier for you. And as I said before, we can actually turn on the pre-delay and sync it, turn that to an eighth as well, and see what happens. So we're getting some really cool effects. I'm gonna leave it there, but I can sure you can imagine, you know, if you push it up even further, you can go up to a quarter, it looks like, you know, and maybe pull this back to a 16th or something. You can get some really cool, interesting effects. So that was feature number 4, and let's move on to feature number 5. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and bypass Neoverb for a second, and this is what we have. Just an impact, right? With Neoverb enabled, and I've bypassing reflections and plate and just leave it on the long chamber or the large chamber. And the reason why I'm doing this just so you can really clearly hear what this thing is doing. But obviously this is probably going to be done with it to a more subtle degree. The two main algorithms here, the plate or the large chamber, or again, the hall or the medium chamber, both have these tone controls, right? We've got dampening, which is a pretty standard parameter that you'll see in reverbs. It also has this over here. So I've got a crossover point, and I'll pick a crossover point inside of the frequency range, and then I have this balance over here. So if I want to make a lighter reverb or a brighter reverb, I can click here and go above 0.5. And if I want to make it darker, I can go below 0.5. So let's go ahead and first listen to it at 0.5, which is just going to be normal. Now let's make it a bright reverb, go up to 1. All right, and now let's make it a dark reverb by bringing it down to 0. Is that not really cool? So obviously we have the frequency crossover position that we can change to whatever we feel is right, depending on what material we're working with. And then we can do any sort of balance in between 0 and 1 that we want. So maybe if I start dark, I mean, it really makes a difference to not only how the reverb tail feels, but how long it seems to last as well. And this is inside of the advanced settings for good reason. You know, a lot of people in a lot of instances won't really be thinking about that, but for your detailed oriented people who really want to get the perfect reverb, having that there is just another huge plus that Neoverb brings to the table. So those were my 5 other really cool features from Neoverb. Obviously, the Reverb Assistant and the masking features are next level, and so are these, but I just wanted to point them out in their own video and let the Reverb Assistant and masking features kind of breathe in their own space because of how powerful they are and how much I personally am going to be using them inside of my projects. Anyway, 5 other really cool features inside of Neoverb from iZotope just came out today. Make sure to click the link in the video description to check out full details. I'm Joshua Casper. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.